often does an average player complete that? Well, how does my quarterback do relative to that? And so it's kind of hard to do that, but you can kind of think, hey, that was a pretty hard throw and it was on target. Even if the wide receiver dropped, I'm happy about it. I think completion percentage is a noisy but a fine stat just to say, hey, are you getting the ball where it needs to go? Now, again, at the tails, at the bottom and the top of completion percentage, there could be some offensive coordinator or scheme issues that might make that look a little not indicative of quarterback talent. I think ESPN's QBR is a really, really nice way to kind of get a broad brush of quarterbacks. What I did with Derek King to evaluate him is I just took away all kind of those screens and passes at or behind the line of scrimmage. Not that those aren't important ways to move the ball in modern college football, but mostly because those aren't really indicative of a quarterback's quality, right? Like, if the scheme's right, you or I could make a lot of those behind the line passes. I can't. I'm a very bad thrower. But, a lot of people could make those kind of behind the line passes. So if you can kind of think, let's isolate as much noise as possible. Let's think about balls past the line of scrimmage. Let's think about no pressure. When a quarterback has everything set up in his favor, what does he do well? I think that's a really, really good way to look at it. So completion percentage, ESPN QBR, if you're watching the game, think, hey, if he got hit, I'm gonna discount that result a little bit and see if you can kind of filter those out a little bit.
Cool, man. So I guess hold
on. I have maybe one more question. Sorry,
That's great.
I was going in and out. I wanted to ask you about another stat, whether it's overrated or not, because this analytic stuff, it's going over my head at some of the time. But I tweeted a stat today about Miami's pass defense and how, they're giving up like 250 passing yards a game compared to 194 passing yards per game last year. Now, be honest, is passing yards per game an overrated stat?
Yes, and I'll tell you why. So imagine that you go play Army, right? And Army is going to run the triple option. They're going to move the ball at least 40 yards on every drive. They're going to take up clock. They're trying to slow down the game, right? How many drives do you think you're going to get against Army relative to drives you'd get against, Mississippi State and Mike Leach right now? Right. That might be a difference of, 9 or 10 drives in the Army game versus 12 or 13 in the Mississippi State game. Right. And that means fewer plays and fewer opportunities. So a game is better, of course, than an entire season. But a game is still not really a good measure of opportunity and volume. And so I think that I filter down to drives. I think I filter down to plays because that gives us a more basic opportunity. Looking at per game stats is kind of like saying, let me just look at like 12 at bats in baseball and then make a conclusion, right? Highly volatile, but also just kind of an arbitrary way to look at things. And so, of course, we want to focus on what opponent is what. But I think that's why single number metrics are kind of misleading, because it's not that passing yards per game are often inconsistent with reality. It's that the potential for there to be confusion or outliers there is pretty high. So we want to look at a stat that's more informative. We want to think about if you separate college football into descriptive, what happened, and proscriptive, what's going to happen. I care more to think about the proscriptive, like what do we think is going to happen going forward. And so that's why I like to filter out outliers. That's why I filter out garbage time in every stat that I do, because I don't care what you do when you're up 30 points, right? I care about how you got up 30 points. So passing yards per game doesn't really have the nuance of filtering out garbage time, looking at how you played relative to expectations given the down distance yard line of where you were, how strong your opponent was, and all of that. So that's why I'm a little bit cool on those kind of aggregate stats and focus more on the per drive, per play, opponent adjusted, garbage time filtered stats, because those are going to give us a better signal going forward.
Okay. I mean, yeah, I tweeted it out because it was kind of surprising, because since Manny Diaz has got here, like our pass defense is usually like top 10, top 15. And I see that, I'm like, what the hell? And people like were losing it at me. They were like, oh, it was all garbage time. And I guess I was wrong. So I had to I apologize, Canes fans.
Well, those plays happened in a descriptive sense, right? But also, I don't care when you're up 30. I do not care what happens. And so that's important to note. Just like if I'm trying to understand how good is Miami's defense, hey, when you're up 30, you're probably putting the backups. I don't care if they're bad right now. Like that doesn't matter to me. So it's important to get some context there.
Yeah, for sure. I love it, man. Oh, I could do this all day. Jordan, do you have any more questions?
I'm good. So I wish I knew more about football analytics because I'm very intrigued. I'm a basketball analytics guy, but maybe I'll have to hit you up on the DMs, Parker, and pick your brain a little bit so you can enlighten me, because I'm a firm believer in analytics stats. I just am not very knowledgeable when it comes to the football ones.
Absolutely. Well, so I'll do some plugs here. There's a great package for the statistical software R called CFB Scrape R, which will get you the play-by-play data for every college football game, and you can get some of those analytics on the website for CFB Scraper. There are a bunch of vignettes, examples for you to kind of say, hey, how do I get started with this? So I think my Twitter can get you to a lot of those, but plenty of opportunities for people to get involved in football analytics and learn more, because it's a continual process of learning for all of us.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We love having you. Dude, you're just you're a font of information, and I appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much, guys. Yeah, I appreciate it. Love talking about it, and have enjoyed kind of following along and rooting for the Hurricanes this season.
Absolutely. Hey, before you go, give me a restaurant recommendation when I go through Dallas next week.
Oh yeah, man. So I'm a Fort Worth guy. But for Dallas, I think you definitely want to do barbecue in Dallas. And so the place to go for that is Pecan Lodge in Deep Ellum. And so I would say if you can go out of your way to get to Pecan Lodge Barbecue in Deep Ellum, a really, really great spot.
All right. Okay. Yeah, man. I'm excited. I get to see Amarillo and just beautiful country.
Yeah, well, Amarillo to Dallas is going to make you stare into the sunset and think about your life for a long time. So prepare for that.
Love it. Thank you so much for coming on, brother.
For sure, guys. Y'all be good.
Hey, thanks, man. Cool. Love having Parker on, man. I wish I need to up my analytics game, because I really am like, there was a point probably 3 or 4 years ago that I could have like told you every player on the Jazz roster where they shot from different, like their effective field goal percentage from different spots on the floor. And like I was that big of a geek. But I've never really got into that type of stuff when it comes to football. So
it's something that I haven't really gotten into, just because like I always heard like coming up, analytics aren't like, they don't tell the real story. And while they don't tell the whole story, I think it's, in today's age, it helps so much when evaluating talent, things like that. I mean, he just told me 2 stats were overrated that I've been judging football players and teams off for the last 3 years.
Yeah. And at least coming from a basketball perspective, like, analytics play they're a very important piece to the overall puzzle. They're not the be all end all. Eye test has a lot to do with it, but eye test is so subjective, man. Like, when me and you watch the game, we don't see the same stuff. And that goes for everyone, right? I don't see the same stuff that Roe from Orange Bowl Boys sees, or I don't see none of us see the same thing. And so having analytics is a very good baseline, so that you can go to the books after the game and say, am I seeing the right thing? And then when your eye test correlates with different number trends, then that's when you know that you're on the right path.
Yeah, and dude, I could, even though like I didn't really get like what he was talking about, like I could kind of get a feeling of what he was going towards. He kind of downed on the Canes offense from the Louisville game. That's surprised me, man.
Yeah, if you notice that, I mean, that's kind of why I asked that question. Like, if you're taking one side of the ball, which one is it? And I've been very outspoken about the Canes defense, but in the last few games, I really think that they've been the better unit. And I've tried to temper people when they're saying, we need to fire Blake immediately, Blake Baker. I've been trying to temper that, being like, let's hold on a little bit because we're not playing good. The check engine light is on, right? Like we're not playing the type of football that's going to get us to a New Year's Six game. However, it's not Blake Baker. It's not entirely Blake Baker. It's not entirely our defense. Our defense got stops against Clemson. I mean, if I told you that we're in a 2-score game against Clemson coming out of halftime and we got 3 stops in a row to start the half? I mean, if I told you that, you'd take that all day, man.
Yeah.
Like, because you'd think that our offense could do something, but it didn't.
Yeah, the last 2 games have been almost an opposite of the first 3, not really counting the FSU game because our offense and defense dominated. But, first 2 games, especially against Louisville, we had our defensive struggles, but the offense was clicking. And then the last 2 weeks, because I've been, back on my blogging grind, and our offense has just not really. Yeah. If you take away the 4 plays on Saturday that were successful were the touchdowns.
Yep.
You take away that, and you don't have to. We rushed for, so Pitt came into the game giving up like 52 rushing yards a game. We got 109, but it felt like we only got 9.
Yeah. And, I think our offense was a little overrated against UAB. I know we got all those rushing yards, but, I mean, those were really mostly chunk plays. And, we weren't moving the ball very easily against UAB. So, I mean, I don't know if I'd call that a bad offensive game because we still put up points and, had what was it, like 300-something rushing yards.
337.
Yeah, so I don't want to call that a bad game, but I think it's overrated in terms of, when we look at the offense and say we played great that game. I'm not sure we did.
I think we were definitely, out of the first 3 games, the UAB game was definitely the most sloppy on offense.
Yeah.
But we still did enough. And we scored the same amount of points against UAB that we did Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And I felt like our offense was so much better against UAB.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I feel like we were able to put together drives. Like Pitt, you just had like these boom touchdowns. And then besides that, you got nothing. Derek King, he threw his first interception wasn't his fault, but that second one was bad.
Yeah. Well, should we answer just a handful of mailbag questions?
Let's do it.
We originally asked for mailbag questions, not thinking that Parker was going to be available tonight. So we probably won't answer all of them, just a handful. But let's see this one. Let's go with our guy Manny, who he's been a friend of the podcast since day one. Mr. Honk Dizzle on Twitter. He wants to know, has Lou Hedley and Jose Borregales been our co-MVPs so far this season?
No. I mean, you may be able to make the case for Lou Hedley, because that dude, like last game, he was one of my 3 stars of the game for my article. Like he was averaging 51 yards a punt.
Yeah. I think the argument's there. I think they're the dark horse because, I mean, those guys are quiet compared to Bubba Bolden or compared to Jalen Phillips. But I mean, really, if you think about it, they're the 2 dudes that have been the most consistent. So the argument is definitely there. I mean, it just goes to show how good they've been is that we don't talk about special teams. They're both those 2 have been pretty much perfect all season.
They have been. Like Jose hasn't missed a kick. Lou is freaking bombing it every single punt. It's a huge advantage that we did not have last year.
Yeah, or the year before.
Feagles.
Yes.
Feagles and Baxa.
Yeah.
My God, 4 of 10 field goals.
In high school?
Yeah. I'd say the MVP right now is probably either, like, in my opinion, I'm going to say either Derek King or maybe Quincy Roche or Bubba Bolden.
Yeah.
Quincy Roche, so he leads the nation in tackles for loss, which I did not know until our Twitter account posted. I'm like, what the hell? He balled on Saturday.
Yeah, he really did. It was nice because Phillips was getting the lion's share of compliments the first few weeks, but I feel like Roche really had his coming out party on Saturday, and hopefully they can both